Hello and welcome to the Brilliant People podcast by executive search firm Assertitude. On this show, we share stories and ideas from the most brilliant leaders and investors to the most determined thinkers and doers defining their fields and our times. I'm your host, Linnea Jungnelius. My amazing guest today is Jerry Hughes, Director of Commercial Excellence at American Securities, a leading private equity firm in the U.S. with $27 billion in committed capital. With typical equity investments ranging from $300 million to $700 million, Jerry has the exciting remit of scaling sizable industry players and capturing market share. With a career that's revolved around the persistent pursuit of growth, Jerry has the tested ideas and tools that strengthen sales and marketing capabilities and achieve business results. And today, I'm privileged to share some of those with you. We also cover the American Securities approach to value creation, his views on the big value unlock in artificial intelligence, and what inspires him to work and live life to the fullest. Jerry, this is going to be fun. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Linnea. Looking forward to it.
Talk us through your story a bit, because as I looked at your journey, I see Ivy League education, early career in banking, a rise through top consultancies in a leading private equity firm. And I'm curious, what influenced you to achieve big things in life and any early experiences that sparked your internal drive and shaped your motivation?
Well, Linnea, the story is there are a bunch of pieces, but yes, as you noted, about 8 years in banking and then business school and then consulting. And I went to work for a client and I came back to consulting and then private equity. But in terms of motivation, really, most of it was just trying to live up to the opportunities that I was given. At a certain point, I ended up at a great school and I wondered, do I really deserve to be here? And got through that mental barrier, but then just always thought, someone has entrusted me with an opportunity that other people could have gotten. So my responsibility is to make something of that and make something of that for me, as well as just over time, I've gotten to the point where I've realized the importance and power of institutions. So to the extent that I can make that institution stronger through whatever it is, that's really important to me, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that.
And today, those things have all culminated in experiences as both an operator and a consultant, and on top of that, a finance background, quite characteristic of the operating partner track. As PE firms add to their portfolio ops teams, they frequently weigh candidates from one of those backgrounds or the other, and sometimes they seek out a blend of the two. How has each of those experiences strengthened your proficiency as an operating partner today? And do you find either background to be a better fit for one type of fund or another?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one of the ones that we face when we're evaluating candidates for the resources group at American Securities. And I'll focus primarily on consulting background and operating executive experience because it's odd to get all three. They both bring really important but different things to the equation. One, consulting, you have that core consulting skill set, which is about projects and teams and communication. If you get consultants together, whatever their background, whatever firm they came from, if they have been in that career for at least 2-3 years, they know how to drop into a situation, evaluate a problem, break it down, figure out how to solve it, come up with a plan, assign responsibilities, and know how to stay coordinated on everyone's work and get to the desired outcome at the end. And it's something that is very second nature once you're a consultant, but if you don't come from that background, it's not quite so easy to do.
Right.
The operating experiences brings a different set of talents and skills, which is really the pragmatism. You've actually lived through these things. You haven't had a series of experiences doing these projects and leaving. You know how messy things are, and you have empathy. You have shared experiences with the people that you're trying to help. And that just makes you much more effective, both in terms of making decisions, as well as selling change and managing change and getting people motivated. I will say that for me, the financial background helps a ton in private equity. And I have this financial economic model lens on the commercial organization that is probably even greater because of that background. But thinking about these decisions on the profile for private equity firms, I think you see most do it in the sensible way, which is if you start out with a small operating team, having operating executives is the most sensible thing to
Mm.
do. Why? Well, you're probably not going to be self-performing projects. You probably don't have a range of experience levels and tenure on your team. What you're going to be doing a lot of is coaching, advising, trying to spot opportunities. And to the extent substantive work needs to be done, you'll go outside and you'll find some external third parties to do it. As firms get bigger and they can afford a larger operating team makes sense, you're going to start to staff up with your ability, with resources so that you can self-perform. You can do things yourself. And so you're going to get more of that consulting type. I don't think it ever makes sense to go 100% on the consulting model. But if you get to a certain size, having that mix and frankly, creating an environment where people with those different backgrounds are learning from each other is tremendously effective.
That makes sense. So both the maturity of the portfolio operations team will dictate where you're pulling people from and the size of the fund. What about those funds that are taking companies more from good to great versus maybe getting into more of those turnaround and restructuring situations? Is there a better fit for those backgrounds depending on that scenario or the style of the fund in that regard?
My experience in American Securities, we do have companies that are on more of a good to great place. They tend to not need as much help, but certainly appreciate ideas and counsel. Either of those backgrounds can be good. Consultants do see more. If I think about my background, I've probably worked with 150 different companies. Whereas even if you have a great operator is maybe 5, 8, something like that. So the opportunity to have seen something that is an idea or something to shoot for a company that's trying to find that little bit extra might be higher coming from a consultant. But, that's an advantage on the margin and may only be a bit theoretical.
Right. And having that sort of transversal expertise, if you will.
Exactly.
You spent a lot of time in consulting and then jumped into private equity. I'm curious what drew you in to change industries, and then what were the initial learnings as you made that pivot?
So I think what drew me in was just interest in a challenge and fit. There are a lot of consulting firms who do a lot of work with private equity. I came from a firm, Blue Ridge Partners, and that's primarily where we found our business. My largest client was American Securities, and so I got to know that team really well, and I felt really comfortable with that group. I think it's got a just phenomenal culture. It's a risk, and I have many colleagues who have tried to make that move, and I think as you know from your work, lots of firms are still trying to figure it out, and they go up and down on the operating team and the size and what type of people. And so to get into an environment where it's not stable is a bit risky. I didn't want to take that kind of risk. AS has definitely figured it out, and I knew the people. So I trusted making a change for the sake of a challenge. You kind of look at this world and wonder, could I be effective and how much more will I learn? I will say it's astonishing as much as you can work with private equity firms from the outside, and I'd probably worked with, 15 or 20, lots of different projects. You think you know it. You don't know it until you're really in the middle and you understand how decisions are made and changes happen, and you live with investments over multiple years as opposed to just the duration of a project.
Jerry, as you describe the American Securities approach to value creation, you mentioned that they've really figured it out. Tell us how you get involved over the course of the investment lifecycle.
So the investment philosophy is to find great companies who are leading in their market with a great management team and invest in those in order to continue their path to grow and create more value. As I say, great management teams, great CEOs, which means that they typically have a value creation plan. They have a strategy that they're working against. Our job, the function of the resources group, is to be a resource to the CEO in particular and to help accelerate those changes. And so primarily what we're doing is that we're making it easier for them to move faster on the performance improvements and the growth that they already have sort of figured out. So we do a lot of things around, focusing now on commercial excellence, pricing, and helping to figure out how to scale a commercial organization to the next level. Things like trying to make the transition into digital marketing, e-commerce, thinking about things like AI. We do a lot of that. But it's not just responding to what's already in the CEO's mind. We do have an important role in kind of looking around the corner, trying to see what's happening in an industry, bringing ideas to them. And so often we'll do that and help. We're talking about 5 years, 6 years, 4 years. Toward the end of that period, there will be new things that have to be on the CEO's agenda that he or she was not thinking of when we got involved with the company. And so we play an important role there as well.
You mentioned several types of initiatives that you will get into, but tell us how and when you get involved over the course of the investment lifecycle.
Typically, most often, we get involved in diligence. So most often, as soon as we sign an LOI, the investment team, the deal team will determine which functions are most important given this potential investment in this situation, and they'll pull us in. And I'd say that over half of the situations now, they're pulling in me or my team to focus on the commercial aspects and pricing in particular as well. That has changed over time, and it's one of these things where when we add a function within the resources group, the investment team needs to start to get familiar with what is it that they bring to the table, how would they operate within a diligence environment. But over the years, we've gotten to the point where we get involved pretty early, and that's super helpful because, one, we're going to help make the decision-making process around making investment much stronger, but two, we're going to be able to understand exactly how is it that we're going to be able to help to accelerate the CEO and management team's plan from the get-go, as well as are there additional opportunities that we should be taking into consideration. The way AS works, many, if not most, private equity firms, they have a formal process for coming up with a value creation plan. We do our version of that within the first 3-4 months of an investment. And then we will formalize the projects, the way in which we'll help the management team achieve specific things that come out of that value creation plan. So if it's commercial, there'll be an element for which I'm responsible.
Most of the companies you support tend to be larger, more established businesses. How do you approach commercial excellence within that context?
I actually recently spoke on a panel at a conference, and one of my panel colleagues is in an environment where it's much earlier stage businesses and it's more of a clean sheet approach. And so he sort of laid out how they think about it. It's so much different if you've got an established business because you've got to be super pragmatic and there's so much more risk because you have something that's working to a certain degree today. They're generating revenues and customers and profits, and you can't mess that up. But at the same time, it's so tempting to try to do too much. So early in my consulting career, we would do these assessments, and we'd have a methodology and all these things we'd look at, and we'd score them against best practices. What's world-class in whatever, pricing or key account management or coaching. And you'd do the old stoplight thing, and you'd come back with a report card, and it'd be all reds and yellows and oranges. But we would try to soften it. We'd say, well, you're going to get this scorecard, and it's just going to say that there's a whole bunch you need to look at. Don't worry about it. Well, no one's going to not worry when they see a bunch of red on their scorecard. Ended up realizing it's just so counterproductive because ultimately what matters, and just to put it in a frame of reference, let's say you're going to score companies on a 1 to 5. A lot of our companies are a 2. It's like C+ or B-. And that sounds not good. It sounds maybe demoralizing, but the fact is there are 3 things that matter: taking share, getting better than you used to be, and being better than your competition. And so that's the approach that we try to take. That's actually an approach we try to think about in diligence, because when you think about gaining or losing share, to whom or from whom and why, those are important questions that will lead you to what and how urgently do you need to do things in the commercial function. And so I think when you take that focus, then you can relax a little bit and then just find, well, what's the short list of things that we could do if we have a gap against a key competitor? Let's focus on that for sure. And then thinking about best in class is interesting as we kind of work through, well, where's the biggest opportunity for us to make a change that's going to make a difference over the medium to long term?
I think that's a lens through which really great operating partners work, which is what is most critical, because, as you mentioned, frequently you're working with something that's messy and you're just trying to iterate and make improvements and you're not trying to change everything. And as you know all too well, there is a very limited window within which you are allowed and enabled to make that change.
Yeah.
Taking all that, what does a day in the life look like for you?
A hard answer because it just varies so considerably. Mondays look similar because most private equity firms, they operate on a weekly cadence, and Mondays is a set of meetings and firm-wide things. Really, a lot depends on, well, think about where I spend my time. Diligence, projects, and then maybe everything else. And so we'll get to that. And so it's going to be dependent upon the deal flow and how many big substantial projects do I have going on with the portfolio at any given time. So there could be a mix of diligence. There could be a mix of being at clients and working on these projects. When I say a project, it's going to look like a consulting-ish project. It's like we need to restructure our commercial organization, and we'll do something that would look like if you go hire some third-party consultant. A lot of what I do, though, too, is coaching. And again, this looking around the corner piece. And so there are a lot of companies and a lot of commercial leaders in the portfolio with whom I still have, I'll have like a monthly just check-in. So I do a lot of that. And then, one of the things that we try to do is bring to our portfolio ideas. We actually run a series of quarterly-ish portfolio-wide commercial leaders calls. And we're just going to be trying to bring the best ideas to the table, especially things that, given the market, we think that they should be focusing on at any given point in time. Over the past few years, things like pricing, for obvious reasons, has been really, really important. So we've spent a lot of time on that topic.
You mentioned speaking to and connecting in with that group of commercial leaders. Many of our clients, the first thing that they do at the point of the deal is to look at that executive leadership team. From where you sit as the operating partner focused on commercial excellence, what do you look for in your top sales and commercial leaders?
There are two ways to think about that. One is if we're bringing a new one in, and the other related but a little different is if you're evaluating someone who's already in the seat. Let me talk about maybe if we're bringing in a new one, because that's a little bit more pure, and then you kind of vary that if you're talking about someone who's already in the seat. I'd say that one, just to get the caveats off the table, every company's got a different set of challenges. And so you got to be sensitive to what is it that they're trying to do. I've got some who they're trying to move toward greater new product innovation. And so that's going to have a different set of demands. Others are looking to change their channel and go-to-market structure. Others are looking to really quickly scale the business. So you got to understand that for sure. You also have to understand exactly what's the scope of the role. The chief revenue officer, commercial officer, sales officer. So there will be some variations there. But generally, one, I want to see someone who's very market connected. Someone who spends a lot of time with customers, a lot of time in the market. And importantly, there's a flip side. Well, what if you had someone who was more a down and in person than an up and out person? Because you need that too. Someone who understands the importance of building a team that is going to be able to address that gap and attend to the internal needs of the organization. So someone who's got familiarity with using a commercial ops or sales ops type of function. I think the other thing that I look to is track record. And so is someone hyper-focused on, one, the numbers, taking share, growing sales, building revenue and EBITDA, and can talk about their experience in those terms because that's how they think about it. I think a track record of being able to overcome challenges. The thing about sales is you've got customers and you've got markets. You have a lot of uncontrollables that you have to deal with. So someone who is accustomed to finding a way to hit the number and can talk about those experiences. And I think the other thing is someone who focuses on the team and they understand the importance of building the team, identifying the right players, can bring people in, coach them up, as well as making the hard decisions to make changes where those are necessary. So that's how I think about bringing a new person in. Of course, if you've got someone who's already in the seat, they may not check all of those boxes. And even when you're trying to recruit someone, you're never going to be able to check all of the boxes. And so that just comes down to judgment. And maybe you can imagine someone better, but instead, can you help coach them up and think, specifically about how you can fill those gaps?
Yeah, exactly. Assessing who you've got, what are their capabilities, where are the gaps, can we live with those gaps? If we can, what sort of scaffolding, if you will, do we need to put in place to help to bridge some of those? And if you do go outside, making sure that you have complete clarity on what you need, what the right fit is, and also making sure that you're getting a person that is brilliant at what they do in terms of getting the right team in place, the right capabilities in place, problem solving, and again, focusing on the outcomes and what truly matters in terms of the growth numbers you're trying to hit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Linnea, you hit something really important too, which is someone who's willing to take help, someone who has got the self-awareness and the humility to realize I don't check all of the boxes, right? And so if you're bringing someone on board who's open to coaching, and we have a lot of companies and a lot of executives, they get excited about the idea of a resources group. They get excited about being able to partner up with someone who's an expert in their function to just get better. And if you start to hear that, then you're going to be in a good place.
And again, because if you're dealing with a private equity environment, in particular, if somebody that's never worked against a sponsor before, right? The ability to want to stretch up, the ability to want to learn, the ability to get more data-driven perhaps becomes all that more important. Another topic that I know you're personally passionate about, that you're interested in, and I know that much of our audience is trying to think about AI today as well. Where do you see the big value unlock with AI, and how can it specifically help drive growth for portfolio companies today?
You're absolutely right. We, as a firm, have been spending a ton of time and energy on this for at least a year. Our managing partner identified this as something that we need to get in front of, and that is going to be really transformative. So we actually kind of formalized some efforts where all of the leaders of our functional teams thought about their functions. Well, where's the value going to be in finance? Where's the value going to be in operations? Where's the value going to be in commercial? And for some time, I was seeing a lot of things that were really nifty, but not necessarily needle moving. And you could go back not quite a year now, and there'd be all kinds of reports published, Gartner and McKinsey or whatever, and they would identify sales and marketing as one of the leading areas where there's going to be early success adopting AI. But they'd cite things like creating email copy or capturing call notes or things like that, which sure, there's some value there, but that doesn't feel big. But within the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 months, started to see some really interesting things on the coaching and training front. And so imagine an AI coach for a negotiation where you kind of feed in the situational information and you're going to have to go negotiate price. And you can role play and you can get feedback on how you're positioning things, et cetera. Similar situation, maybe if you're going to go do an introductory pitch. We started to see some capabilities coming out of some of the sales training firms. There's a firm called Imparta who's on the leading edge of this type of stuff, and it's really, really exciting. We're also seeing, like real time, I think yesterday I saw something where Salesforce just came out with a sales AI co-pilot coach. So it's going to happen really quickly. The other things were, essentially if you're going to identify the numbers that capturing call notes was addressing or whatnot, it's freeing up time, making things more efficient for a sales rep. Sure, that's going to be helpful. But the numbers that these coaching capabilities address are manager numbers, sales manager numbers, getting good sales managers and getting them leverage and increasing their, say, span of control. That's a huge value unlock because the ability to scale a sales team is highly dependent upon this like iron law of 8 to 10 span of control, and you got to find those managers. It takes a lot of time. So if you can increase the span of control, if you can increase the success rate of onboarding new reps, increasing their overall skill levels, and shortening the onboarding time, you can do the math on that. And that's a massive value opportunity. So that's where we're getting really, really excited.
That's really cool. You brought up something else that's so important there, which is the math. How do you think about the economics of the commercial organization as a machine?
Yeah. It's in some ways really simple, right? You could do the Excel formula, and I'm going to speak in terms of a traditional sales organization, but every salesperson should be able to generate X in revenue and Y in margin. That person costs a certain amount, And then there's going to be overhead associated with that person, which is everything else, sales management and technology and travel and whatnot. So you could do this ROI math, which is, I have a sales rep, they, sell $5 million and that leads to $1.5 million of revenue of margin, and they cost X, and therefore it's a good investment. I'm going to go add more salespeople. And then you can get a little bit more complicated back to the other issue, which is, well, you can't just add a salesperson, right? You can add them, but only so many of them are going to be successful. It's going to take a certain period of time, which just leads to you're going to have to think about pacing. Remarkably, a lot of sales leaders, commercial leaders, and organizations, they just don't think in terms of the math, like every day. And it's one of the things that I've come to really highlight in our diligences, where you just ask the questions, what does a typical sales rep generate? What percentage of your sales team hits that target? How long does it take them? What's the cost? What's the overhead, et cetera? There are some leaders who get it. You ask them those questions, and it's like, yeah, of course, I think about this all the time. They generate the 5 and the 1.5, and they cost this. There are others who it's like they've been asked that question for the first time, and it's just so telling. And so, one, that's a bit of a red flag, frankly. But if we end up in an okay place, what we try to do is just drive toward really having solid answers to those inputs to the equation, and then also focusing on things like the variance. Because you could say, yeah, you can always run an average, but is it like that's all over the map, in which case you don't have a machine, you don't have a system. You have a bunch of sales reps, you have a portfolio of sales reps, and there's numbers for each of those, but it's not something that's replicable. And if it's not replicable, then it's hard to invest in it. But if you can get it so that you've got, within a range, you know what you're going to get, it can create an environment where you have a lot of confidence to invest in scaling that function in that organization, and that's what we try to get to.
That's such a good point. And if you run into those scenarios where you have more variance, more inconsistency, where do you start to get the system in place?
Well, usually it's focus first on the sales rep, and just very specifically, what should a sales rep be able to produce? And then if they have variance, it means, well, you've got a portfolio. Well, okay, let's look within that portfolio. Do you have anyone who is doing things the right way? And can you start to build your model, your success model for a rep around that? And we've actually had some companies where we've done exactly that, and it's an environment where you actually had to make a whole bunch of changes. And you think about those milestones. First milestone is created the first rep who hit our targets using the system around which we're going to build our sales function. One is good, but it's still not just one. But then two, once you get to 2 or 3, where they're doing things in the way we want them to do it, producing the results we need to produce, then you start to have something. So that's what we do. And then once you get there, then you can focus on all the costs around it, which if you optimize those, you're just going to get more numbers out of your salespeople. And then, how do you scale that sales organization around that model?
That's such great advice, because I think no matter which business you are, no matter what sales leader you are, anyone could start there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at the top producer.
Yep.
And nature versus nurture, right? What is inherent, or what is the system around that person?
Yeah, and importantly, it's not always the top person. Sometimes the top person is just an aberration. It's like some Superman who, for whatever reason, you've got someone, they're wildly successful. No one is ever going to be able to do it that way. So, well, okay, who's next?
Yeah.
Is that something that we can build off of?
Totally. Let's get off the work topic now. Are there any fun avenues where you pursue personal growth outside of work?
I guess the thing I'd point to is I do try to be really involved in my community. Something that has consumed a lot of time over the last 15 plus years as I spent time serving in my village government on the board as an elected official, and even outside of that have done various committees and been involved a little bit in local politics. And politics is such a bad word these days, but one of the things that is gratifying to me is how kind of nonpartisan, like politics shouldn't be bad. Politics is about understanding things and trying to compromise and get things done. And at the very, very local level, often it's just not at all partisan. and you're working with your neighbors to figure things out and get things done that you can see and touch and really make a difference. And so I continue to spend time there and continue to get a lot of satisfaction out of that.
That's awesome. And are there any habits that you have that help you show up as your best self every day?
Early in my career, I did what probably a lot of people did, which is focus on time management and try to get really efficient and organized around things, which I sure still do spend time on. But over time, I've realized energy is just as important as time. And so a lot of my focus, it's just the basics. It's get sleep, take time off, get outside. Like this morning, was able to walk to get over here with you, Linnea, and be in the sun. But also, I think, to focus on the people that you're working with and helping and just having gratitude. And not just for your success, but for my ability to be in a position to help other people.
Yeah, that's great. I find very similar things for myself. It is a little bit about the discipline, but it is also about just doing the stuff that's so basic, but if you do it consistently, it makes a difference. It is the sleep. It's the food. It is who you surround yourself with. It's a little bit of sunshine in the morning. And like we were talking about before, possibly just like a little bit of a U.S. Open or tennis game also.
Exactly.
Are there any leaders that are inspiring you lately?
So I get inspiration from a lot of things, and you ask leader and you'd think like business leader, but that's actually not what immediately comes to mind. So I think maybe in some of the things we've talked about, you've picked up on how I view coaching as a really important part of my role. And I actually have a very close special friend who is a world-class triathlete and has become a coach. Her name's Sarah Fix, and she lives in our community. I've known her for 20 years and had an opportunity to kind of watch her transition from, she's done Kona, World Ironman 20 times or something like that, to starting to coach. And in those first years, it was a bit of a challenge for her because she's coming at it as, like, she knows how to do these things. She can get on the podium. It comes easily to her. And she struggled a little bit to kind of connect and be able to be effective with people who aren't starting from the same place. Over time, she just really embraced and sort of got the fact that she needs to meet people where they are. And then something else that I saw turned on was one of the best words to describe her. She's a cheerleader. She is truly a cheerleader for everyone that she works with. And that has just made her so effective because people know that it's not about her, it's about them. She's there for them, and they'll do anything for her. And it's just such a beautiful relationship between the coach and the athlete. So I see that, all the time. And every time I witness that or hear about that, it does inspire me on that part of my job and trying to be there, meet the people I'm working with where they are, and truly be there for them.
That's a great shift you were describing in terms of that initial frustration sometimes when you work with people and you're like, can't you just do this? Here's what great looks like. But no, you have to understand who you're working with, the person, and then, again, inspire and be a magnet for that change for those people around you. I love that. Now, any books, podcasts, quotes that you also draw inspiration from?
When it truly comes to inspiration and books and things like that, most of what I care about is sort of timeless. I'm a liberal arts guy. Bible, the Greeks, Shakespeare, Dostoevsky, Jung. Human nature doesn't change. Forever and across geography, we struggle with the same things. Purpose, messing up, recovery, legacy, and just how to work with other people. So that's where my inspiration comes from. Now, is that the only place I spend time? No. I will say, we were talking about AI and whatnot. The technical information I need for my job is increasing so rapidly. It's actually pretty sleepy. 5 years ago, doing sales effectiveness stuff, there really wasn't anything new. Now there's so much that's new. And so I do keep tabs of the news on the technology and AI front. We actually have within AS a Slack channel where a bunch of people who are focused on this stuff share information all the time. I actually think it's a great practice that I would recommend to anyone because there's no one or two sources for the information's coming from all over the place. You ask about podcasts, there are a bunch of sales podcasts and whatnot. And there are a bunch of AI podcasts. it's hard to find good, and I think about podcasts as it's not news, maybe it's in there, but it's really sense making. It's people who could take the time to make sense out of what does this mean for you. And so I'll just note, I don't think there's a whole lot out there on the sales and AI front. It gets covered, but very episodically. But I think there's an opportunity for someone out there to start to pull this all together and make sense of it in this arena.
Excellent. We're going to have to launch a Brilliant People Podcast 2.0. Brilliant Sales and AI.
AI and sales.
Yes.
Excellent.
There we go. We are getting close to the finish line here. And in each episode, we like to wrap up by defining brilliance in a few ways. I'm going to hit you with a quick lightning round. If you could please fill in the blanks.
All right.
Purpose is?
Purpose is, one, always a focus on really serving others, giving more to your community than you take back. It's very dynamic. It's what is the next set of things you need to do to become the best version of yourself?
Excellent. Leadership is?
Leadership is finding a set of shared objectives for a team, finding the way in which you can work together to make something meaningful happen, and then inspiring and keeping that team organized.
Love that. Success is?
Success is the piece that comes from living a integrated and principled life. There are a whole bunch of other things that will come, whether it's kind of resources or recognition, which matter a little bit, I guess. But at the end of the day, if you're at peace with what you're doing, then that's the ultimate success.
I love that definition and holds true to your stoicism philosophies that you were just talking about that you follow. Brilliant leaders are?
Brilliant leaders are observant, which has a bit of an other orientation built into it. They are focused and action-oriented.
Brilliant commercial leaders are?
Brilliant commercial leaders are going to be market and customer connected. That's how they're observant. They have to be great at coaching, and they have to be economically grounded. They have to think in terms of the numbers.
Yep. I perform at my best when?
So I perform at my best when I'm with a great team, working against a shared objective, and we're successful together.
Jerry, thank you so much for joining us today here in New York City and having this wonderful conversation. There's so much good stuff here that any commercial leader, any operating partner, any resource group really can take away to help to scale up and scale up more quickly any company that they're partnering with.
Super. Thank you, Lenny. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you to Jerry Hughes of American Securities for joining us on today's episode. I hope all of you walk away inspired with new ideas for how to grow your business and grow as a person. And thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in. That's it for this episode of the Brilliant People Podcast. I'm Linnea Jungnelius. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. And follow Assertitude on LinkedIn for the latest insights on how to lead and perform at your best. Until next time, stay brilliant at work.